Revenge films.
My name is Sam Miller. I'm 28. When I was in high school, my father died of illness, and since then, I've been living with my mother.
Sam, do you remember Natalie? I heard she's getting married, so she wants us to come to her wedding.
Huh? Natalie? I remember her, but why did she invite us in the first place? Natalie was the sister of my father's sister's husband, a distant relative of ours, whom we barely knew. Natalie, who had never been able to find a man, finally had a chance to marry at a matchmaking party in the year she turned 40. Her parents were overjoyed by this, and the ceremony was to be held in a grand manner, and we were invited too, as relatives from a distant family. Since we were invited, we couldn't refuse the invitation out of spite, so my mother and I decided to attend the ceremony after all. And on the day of the ceremony, the wedding ceremony went off without a hitch in a peaceful atmosphere. Natalie's father sat around the table with the other relatives. I was so nervous I couldn't sleep at all last night. Still, I'm glad my daughter finally found happiness. He seemed to be in a good mood the whole time. Usually doctors stop me because I have high blood pressure, but it's such a special day. I guess it wouldn't hurt to have a few drinks today. I heard him say that. You're right! It's your daughter's big day! Think of it as a reward for all the work you've put into raising her, and drink up!
Yeah, it's good once in a while. Just because you drink today doesn't mean you're going to die.
The bride's father's relatives and his wife cheered him on. Is he going to be okay? I was thinking as I listened to the conversation. Eventually, it was time for the father of the bride to give his speech. He looked like he had had quite a bit to drink, but he had a strong footing. But when his speech started... I would like to take this opportunity to thank my daughters, thank you so much for attending Natalie's wedding. Natalie was always a very easy child to handle. She was like sunshine, laughing at everything, and making everyone around her laugh as well. Thanks to her, our family was always, what was it? Oh, we were filled with smiles, and the 40 years that I spent with my daughter were truly a blessing. But on the other hand, my daughter never talked to her family about her worries and anxieties. As a parent, I was concerned about that because she often kept things to herself. The fact that Natalie was able to meet a groom that she could speak her heart out, what was it? Oh, I'm both happy and a little sad as a parent. The father of the bride was supposed to give a heartfelt speech, but he was drunk and his speech was somewhat slurred and strange.
Did he drink a bit too much? Or maybe he's just nervous. You can do it!
The bride's mother laughed, and the bride was giggling from her seat watching her father in such a state. That's when it happened. So... Just as he was about to say something, the bride's father suddenly fell into a crouching position, as if he had lost control of his body. He collapsed from a sitting position to a lying position on his back.
Honey.
The bride's mother rushed over. Hey, what happened? The room was abuzz. Many people rushed around him in a hurry, and the bride, startled by the suddenness of the situation, I was sitting close by, so I hurried over to get a closer look. The bride's father was sleeping and snoring like crazy.
Oh my, he's asleep! He hasn't had a drink in a long time, so the booze must have gotten to him and he fell asleep.
Hey, he must be getting really old to drink at that amount! The room was filled with laughter.
Oh my gosh, Dad! Everyone's laughing at you! You're always so entertaining.
Even the bride, who rushed over to him, was laughing. But I was having flashbacks of things I'd seen before. and I was breaking out in a cold sweat. I shouted as I saw several men trying to wake up the bride's father. "Don't touch him! Hurry up and call the ambulance!" I was distraught and screaming. People around me were stunned for a moment, but then burst into laughter. "He's just sleeping! Why do we need to call an ambulance? Calling an ambulance would just be an embarrassment! If he wakes up and finds himself in an ambulance, he'll be startled, and the next thing you know, he'll probably faint!"
That's right. I'd hate to have an ambulance siren blaring at the wedding. I'll be a disgrace for generations to come.
"But he's not just sleeping! If you don't get him to the hospital quickly, it could be life-threatening!"
You're overreacting.
No matter how much I explained, they laughed and didn't seem to get it. If we don't do something about it, it's really... I was at my wit's end, so I went to tell the wedding staff to call an ambulance. However... "Stop it! You're embarrassing us!" The relatives got in the way and wouldn't let them call at all, and I had left my cell phone in my coat. So I got it out and tried to call an ambulance myself. "That's enough! Are you trying to ruin the wedding?" I couldn't call because I was yelled at, and they interfered with me. And so, as the toxic time passed in idleness, the atmosphere in the room became disconcerting. I can see why. Even with all this fuss, the father of the bride never woke up. And no matter how much we called to him, shook him, or tapped him on the cheek, he never responded. Even when they carried him up and put him in a chair, he was so flaccid that he collapsed out of it. They finally realized something wasn't right.
Hurry and call the ambulance. There's something wrong with my husband.
"I think it might be alcohol poisoning!" All hell broke loose, and an ambulance was called. The bride's father didn't have alcohol poisoning. He had a stroke, just as I predicted. As a matter of fact, my father died of a stroke too. Unfortunately, the bride's father died without ever waking up. I don't know exactly how long they wouldn't let me call an ambulance, but it was probably 10 or 15 minutes. The bride, who'd been taking the initiative in sabotaging me, thinking she wouldn't be interrupted on her big day, had a difficult time coming to terms with the situation.
If we'd taken him to the hospital sooner, none of this would have happened. If I hadn't married in the first place, my father wouldn't have died.
She cried, distraught, and the wedding was called off on the spot. My mother told me that the bride had a mental breakdown since then, suffering from transient global amnesia due to rapid emotional outbursts and stress, and she could no longer recognize the groom when she saw him. Eventually, after a mess with the groom's side, they divorced because it was impossible to continue the marriage any longer. For the next year or so, the bride was mentally unstable, repeatedly going in and out of the hospital, and even when she returned home, she showed signs of suicidal thoughts. Her elderly mother had no time to rest and spent all her time taking care of her mental health, and she was completely worn out. After the wedding, the bride's family, which should have been full of smiles, hit rock bottom, and all the smiles disappeared. Furthermore, the relatives who interfered with me at that time developed a bad relationship, initially blaming each other for the interference. Somehow, it became my fault for not pushing through and calling an ambulance, and my mother and I started getting nasty comments about it. They accused me of leaving the father of the bride to die, of not telling people that he had a stroke when I knew he had one. I thought they were the ones who wouldn't listen to me, saying that I wasn't a doctor, even though I explained everything to them. But my mother snapped before I did, and we broke ties with some of our relatives. The relatives continued to wrangle over the bride's father's inheritance, and a bloody feud broke out, resulting in the split up of the family. For a while after that unfortunate wedding, my mother's anger didn't subside.
We shouldn't have went to the wedding if it was going to end like this.
To be honest, I'm glad we were able to cut ties with such a worthless relative when there was almost no harm done to us.
How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.